accuse you of being a terrorist, and we have secret documentation that you are a terrorist, and guess what? You look at it because it's national security, so we're going to hide you away in these things. And you know, a lot of people think that sounds ridiculous, but look what happened in Germany. First they registered their guns, then they took their guns. And this country has come to the same thing. All
right, let's get Senator Murphy to respond.
Yeah, I do think that's ridiculous. I do. I think comparisons to the Nazis are over the top. I didn't support the Patriot Act. I didn't. I thought it overstepped its bounds, but I also didn't think that it was a vehicle for the federal government to swoop down into people's houses with black helicopters and spirit them away in the middle of the night. I just don't believe that that's the agenda. Realistically, I mean, let's talk about this for a second, because you certainly do hear people like this caller talking about needing high-capacity magazines in order to ward off the government. Well, let's be realistic. If really the government had an agenda to come in and declare martial law and take over neighborhoods and imprison people without cause, which I just don't think is the case, and I think is a little ridiculous, a assault weapon is not going to stop that from happening, because the U.S. government has weapons that are a lot more powerful than a Bushmaster with a 30-round magazine. The federal government has tanks and has F-16s and has Black Hawk helicopters. And so I think we decided long ago that we are not going to necessarily read the Second Amendment as an ability to arm citizens at the same level as the federal government so as to protect the citizens against the federal government coming in and taking over neighborhoods. That's just not happening, and that's not the agenda behind the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, despite what some people may think. So I do think that that's a misplaced notion, but I absolutely do think that it's part of the rationale for what the NRA is talking about today. I think that this caller is plugged into what Wayne LaPierre is talking about. Wayne LaPierre really does believe that President Obama has some secret agenda that is going to end up with the confiscation of guns and the takeover of towns and neighborhoods in our country. That's ridiculous, but it certainly does, I think, educate part of the position that the NRA has today, which is fundamentally out of step with the mainstream of this nation and the mainstream of gun owners in the country.
American Hero on Twitter says, the Second Amendment must give us some right. What is that? Name a single firearm that I may keep and bear without infringement. So as one of the sponsors of the assault weapons ban of 2013, tell us about the exemptions.
Yeah, so I'd encourage anybody who has this question to go and actually read the assault weapons ban that we introduced some weeks ago, because that bill actually lists several thousand weapons that would not be illegal under the law. And that's not an inclusive list. That is just a set of examples of weapons amongst the over 10,000 weapons that would still be available to individuals. What the assault weapons ban basically says is that a gun that has a detachable clip and then one other military-like feature, such as a pistol grip, that would be reserved for military usage, but that the thousands of weapons today that are used largely for hunting and for sports shooting would still be available. And so that's a really good resource. I won't claim to be able to recite chapter and verse every single gun that's on that list, but it's pretty easy to find. And I think that will assuage a lot of people's fears about what this bill is really about. There's going to be a plethora of weaponry that anyone in this country will still be able to get their hands on, even if this bill was to pass.
William in Parrotsville.
Assault weapons and capacity magazines. If you take it away from the law-abiding citizens, what are you going to do about the gangs and the drug people and the people that use them to rob banks and stuff?
Well, another good point, right? Because we clearly acknowledge that the Second Amendment protects your right to have a gun for self-protection. I agree with that. And the question is just what kind of firepower do you need in order to protect yourself? The reality is that most people that have a gun in their home for self-protection, that gun is much more likely to be used to kill them than it is to kill an intruder. And those are the facts, that guns that people have in people's homes are more likely to kill them. That was the case for Nancy Lanza. right? Nancy Lanza had that Bushmaster in the house, as well as several other pistols, reportedly in order to protect herself. She'd gotten divorced. She was living by herself along with her son in that house, and she thought she needed some guns to protect herself. Her son also had an interest in firearms, and so that may have been part of the reason as well. That gun that Nancy Lanza thought she had in order to protect herself from intruders got used to kill her, and then it got used to kill 20 little kids down the street at Sandy Hook Elementary School and 6 of their teachers. That's the reality of what happens today. And so I don't deny the right, the portion of the Second Amendment which allows somebody to keep a weapon for self-defense, but let's just acknowledge that most of the time that weapon that is in the house for self-defense doesn't get used for that reason. It gets used to kill the person in the house, or it gets used for a suicide by a family member in the house. And you know, as Vice President Biden has said, there are still a lot of high-powered weaponry out there, like a shotgun, that would do a much better job, or just do as effective a job of taking on an intruder as an assault weapon or a weapon with a high-capacity magazine would do.
Senator Murphy, what are your